Hello everybody, Blue Smoke Productions here, or Nicholas Taylor, whatever you want to call me, and welcome back to the Blue Smoke Podcast. I would come up with some kind of quip, like the only podcast where a guy rambles about trains, but no, there's other podcasts that exist, and I honestly can't think of one right now. And this week we're back on the podcast, and partially why I pushed it back was I wanted to do a Q&A video originally, so I put out a thing on Instagram that I was doing a Q&A. By the way, you can check out the Blue Smoke Productions Instagram at instagram.com/bluesmokeproductions or something like that. I don't know. The link will be in the description. And no one asked me any questions. So, that was fun. So then I was going to have my friend NS7623 on the podcast, but he doesn't own a mic, so we couldn't record the podcast. Well, we couldn't do it over Discord. Well, I guess we are going to do it over Discord if we do it, because due to coronavirus, everyone's locked up. Social distancing is the hot new thing right now, and everything's closed, so yeah, it's fun. And actually, speaking of which, I figured I should give some updates of railroads that have closed due to the coronavirus. So, Andrew Lieb commented on the 1.5 episode about the coronavirus, and he mentioned that the Strasburg Railroad and the Durango and Silverton Railroad have closed down. And I had a feeling the Durango and Silverton Railroad wasn't going to stay open for much longer. If the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad was closing down, the Durango and Silverton was going to follow, because Durango and Silverton and the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad are owned by the same company. So they're sister railroads. So yeah, I want to thank Andrew Lieb for providing that info for me. And thank you for all the comments you leave on every episode of the podcast, Andrew. It is very appreciated. I'm going to try and work something out with NS7623 because I want to have him on the podcast before I have anyone else. And and I do have some people who I want to have on the podcast, but I want to have NS7623 on before I have anyone else because he's my best friend when it comes to railfanning. Speaking of railfanning, that's what we're actually going to talk about today. What are my rules when it comes to railfanning? Because I do have rules when it comes to railfanning. These are my personal rules. These aren't the universal rules. I'm not going to say that my rules are like the best rules or the worst rules. I'm just going to say that these are my personal rules. These are what I do when I go railfanning or chasing. First thing I always do when I'm actually at the railfanning location, I stay, Union Pacific says stay 25 feet away from the tracks. I don't disagree with that statement, but if you watch my videos, I have been known to stand closer. I try to stay 10 to 25 feet away, a minimum 10. The farthest I stand is from the ballast. I always try to stay away from the ballast. Because the ballast, for me, that's the line. Well, I think that is the official line. When you step on the ballast, you're officially on railroad property. Oh, another thing I want to bring up is don't put coins on the railroad tracks. I remember years ago I made a railroad safety rant about not putting coins on the railroad track. It was I came off as such a dick in that one. Although, admittedly, I had a point. You shouldn't be putting coins on the railroad tracks. But I remember some of the comments I got on that video afterwards that were just someone was I bet you suck penis. And I'm just what a childish thing to say. I took down that video because it was cringy. I came off as a bit negative, and the video was getting a lot of dislikes on it. And it was getting a lot of views, but a lot of dislikes. It wasn't something I wanted to be known for. I wanted to be known for the trains I've chased, and not for some video of me bitching about putting coins on the railroad tracks. But I do stand by that. Just don't do it. Technically, you are trespassing on railroad property. And yes, don't walk on the railroad tracks. That's another thing. Do not walk on the railroad tracks. I'm actually going to point this out. I was up in Woodstock. If you've ever been to Woodstock, downtown Woodstock, you drive right through it. There's the railroad tracks run straight through downtown. And there was this couple down there with their little toddler, and they were playing on the railroad tracks, and they had them the kid was doing a split on the railroad tracks and playing on them. I'm just like, please just don't do that. Even if the Georgia Northeastern Railroad line, which is the line that runs through Woodstock, even if that is kind of a desolate line with only like 3 or 4 trains going through it a day, that doesn't mean one's not going to come through. And if one comes through, you could very well, you could get hurt, your child could get hurt. Like, I know some people think like, oh, I'll just get off the rails, but sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes your foot could get caught in the rails. Your shoelaces could get caught. It's too big of a risk. It's way too risky. And the one thing I always have to bring up this story, is I'm pretty sure, I don't know how many people in the Railfanning community are aware of this, but it's a very big story in the filmmaking community. And as I'm part of both communities, I've heard this story, and it affects me personally as both a Railfan and a filmmaker. A lot of people, it affects them as like a filmmaker or a crew member on film. But as a Railfan, it affects me very much as well. And that is the Midnight Rider incident, or the Sarah Jones incident. Basically, they were filming, I don't remember this, there was this movie being filmed called Midnight Rider. It was basically a Greg Allman biopic. And there's a scene in the movie, a dream sequence, where Greg Allman is in a bed laying across a bridge, and then like a train comes. And in order to film this dream sequence, the director wanted to use a really high trestle bridge in Atlanta. The bridge was owned by CSX. It was on CSX trackage, so they contacted CSX, but CSX said, no, it's complicated. The director chose not to listen, and he decided to film on the bridge anyway. And guess what happened? A train came. And you know, in a lot of movie scenes, like, Stand By Me, or like other movies like that, where they're crossing the bridge, but then the train comes and they have to hurry across the bridge. That's exactly what it was like. They had to hurry. They had to get all the camera crew off the bridge. They had to get all the cameras off the bridge. But eventually they were just like, you know what? Screw the cameras. Just get off the bridge. They had to get the bed off the bridge, thinking about that, because that could have caused a derailment. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it caused any derailments or anything, but unfortunately, not everyone got off the bridge in time. The first major injury I could talk about was, I think it was a makeup person, or maybe it was a camera person. I don't know, but she managed to just, slip away from the train. She didn't get hit, but she was just on the edge of the bridge, and as the train went by, the wind from the train was so like fierce, it blew the skin right off of her arm. And that is like, just thinking about that makes me cringe. But that's not the worst of what could have happened. The worst thing that happened was camera woman Sarah Jones was killed by the train. And rightfully so. The crew shut down filming. The director was banned from a movie set. He was arrested for involuntary manslaughter. And yeah, he's banned from working on movies, rightfully so. Like I said, this entire situation disgusts me as both a Railfan and a filmmaker, because they should have known better than to film this movie on an active main line. And that's the thing. That man has someone's blood on their hands. It's a very well documented incident in the filmmaking industry, not so much in the Railfan industry, I don't think. But I remember as well, in film school, we went on a field trip to a lighting warehouse, and they had signs all over the entire thing that said Sarah Jones is with us. And they mentioned the story, and I knew what the story was, though. And I actually remember, I have another story. Earlier that day, I was in my school's film club, and we were talking about making some kind of film. I don't know what it was about. I think it was like a found footage film, and they talked about filming on railroad tracks, and I was just like, no, you guys are not filming on railroad tracks, not just because I'm a Railfan, but because I care for the safety of my classmates and the crew. And I was telling them outright, you guys film on the railroad tracks, you can do it without me. So I was making it clear I was not for it. I was not going to let any one of my friends film on railroad tracks. And that's the same thing I'm going to bring back to you guys. It goes back to that. Do not film on the railroad tracks. Don't put things on the railroad tracks. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. Another rule I've broken this rule occasionally, but this is just something I do personally. I prefer it, actually, is don't go railfanning by yourself. I've gone railfanning by myself before, and I've gotten railfanning by myself in some scary areas, honestly. Like, I think I went railfanning... like I said, I've been railfanning by myself a couple of times in some pretty decently scary areas, and yeah, it is kind of scary. I remember I think I went railfanning at night in a rather bad area. I think it was the 2 trains on the Georgia Northeastern. In both those videos I filmed in the same spot. It was in a bad spot, a bad area. It's not exactly the safest place to be. Don't go railfanning by yourself, especially don't go chasing by yourself. In my opinion, I don't go chasing by myself. I've always had a driver when it comes to chasing because I've always been afraid of getting distracted and crashing my car. And then, then my car's crashed, I could hurt myself. So I always have a getaway driver. I think the other reason why I don't go railfanning by myself or chasing by myself is I grew up as a Boy Scout. I was in Boy Scouts growing up. And they always had a buddy system intact. Like, always have a buddy system. You always have a buddy with you. And that's how I've always done it. That's always how I've always done things. I guess the next thing I want to talk about when it comes to railfanning and chasing, this is more specific for chasing, is planning your chase. You've got to plan your chase. I plan everything in advance. I set up all my spots in advance. Basically, I look at the railroad route by road, and I go over like which spots can I catch. So like I started doing this when I did my very first chase at the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad. So what I did for that was, I pulled up the route between Dillsboro and Bryson City for the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad, and I looked up basically where I needed to go, like which spots I could get. And I picked all my spots from there. I added the addresses. Then I printed out all the directions between each spot. And sometimes it's kind of hard because some of these spots don't have numbers on them. So I have to select the exact spot. Like, I remember when I was doing the Big Boy video, when I took the very last shot in Lamar, Arkansas, that shot, when I was looking for it, I couldn't find a number on it. So I had to select that spot exactly, and sometimes the directions won't point you towards that way, but thankfully it worked for me, and we got everything. I'm glad everything worked out on those chases. Just every chase I've done, I've always done that. With the exception of the Georgia Northeastern chase, I didn't really map out everything, but there was only 2 or 3 spots I actually wanted on the Georgia Northeastern Railroad. Those being the spot outside of the extended stay hotel, the spot that goes, a spot called Blackwell Road. That's the nice little, it's probably the most scenic spot on the route between Elizabeth and Woodstock, and downtown Woodstock itself. I wanted the train going by the Freight Kitchen and Tap. So that's one of the few chases I didn't map out, and that was one of the few chases where I drove myself, but I can drive myself when I'm chasing, some colorful diesels. If it was a steam locomotive, that situation probably would have been different. But yeah, I always just plan out my chases, because if you just go to the spot and you don't know where to go and you just pick spots out of random, it just, I don't know. I just don't like that, especially if you're not familiar with the area. I know a lot of rail fans, they film loads of trains because they're residents of the area. Like, there's Jacob Riley. He films the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad a lot, and he's very familiar with the area. Smoky Mountain Steam has filmed that area a lot. So they probably, I don't know if they need maps by this point. If they're listening, let me know your processes down below. And actually, for all my listeners who are listening, listeners that are listening to this podcast, please let me know what are your processes, actually. I would like to know your processes. What are your rules when it comes to rail fanning? Like, do you like standing closer to the railroad tracks? Don't worry, I'm not going to like report you to the railroad police or anything like that. I'm not that bad. But let me know how you prefer rail fanning. Like, do you prefer taking wider shots or closer shots? How do you guys prepare for train chases and rail fanning projects and everything? That's just something I would like to know. So I suppose that wraps up just about everything I have to say for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Blue Smoke Podcast. Comment below what are you guys' rules when it comes to rail fanning, and how you guys rail fan and how you prepare for chases and stuff like that. And this is Blue Smoke Productions saying goodbye and thank you for watching.